So, differentiate or die, that sounds like a pretty serious topic of conversation, particularly in the world of telling stories. So, I thought I'd lighten the mood a little bit and add another tagline to that. Differentiate or die, question mark, a lesson in fishing for the horticultural industry. Hopefully it'll make sense as we go through. So, before I get started, I wanted to get a quick sense from everyone in the room as to the current levels of social media use. Can I have a bit of a show of hands as to who's using social media currently for their business? Oh, there's a few. And are you the people that are responsible for managing the social media accounts, or do you have someone within your business that does that? Okay, so we've only got a couple in here that are physically doing that sort of frontline grunt work. And how many of you are actually on social media in a personal perspective? Almost the majority of the room. That's great. Okay, so a little bit of a mixed response. It wasn't as unanimous as I kind of expected in today's day and age. I've put up here some of the words that are being used to describe social media out there. Perhaps it's not that relevant to this audience. Some of you look like you're more the Gen Ys and have probably adopted social media at a larger rate than perhaps the baby boomers, but you may be surprised to know that one of the largest growing segments within the social media uptake is the grandparents, particularly the grandmothers. So women from the age of 50 to 65 are picking up social media at a faster rate than any other generation. The millenniums, of course, are born with a mobile phone in their hand. I have a 6-year-old son, and I think at the age of 18 months, he knew his way around an iPhone far quicker than what I did. The level of intuition that has been integrated into our devices is quite astounding. And so the trend in social media use can only be growing. Some of the words being used to describe social media out there are mysterious, somewhat frustrating, overwhelming. Some are saying that it's irrelevant to their business. Some think it's for the young. Others think that social media is getting old. Is there anyone out there who's brave enough to admit that they feel any of those things about social media? Or have we reached that critical tipping point where, oh, we have got one show of hand up the back. That's great. Oh, a couple of extra ones out there. Excellent. That's what I want to see. Hopefully, my presentation today will give you a little bit of a different perspective. It will add on what Kathy's sort of spoken about. There may be some level of duplication. I won't try and bamboozle you with stats. I think there's enough out there for you all to research online in terms of percentages of who's using social media and how you can connect with them and the rise of various platforms. But what I wanted you to think about is how you start to tell your story or your company's story and how you can all become champions for social media within your business. So regardless of what you think social media may or may not be, I can absolutely categorically say that social media is not static. It's not one size fits all. It's certainly not a passing phase. Back in 2006, when I first got involved in social media, playing around with sharing flip books, if you like, of my holiday travels and my latest romance and the latest review of the restaurant that I attended. Many thought that it was a passing phase, that it was a complete waste of time and really we should be focusing on some other things. The advent of the mobile device has taught us, and people are becoming more and more attached to their mobile devices. People are consuming media at an insatiable rate. They can't get enough of media, of information, of engagement with others. We've become completely obsessed with those devices, and sometimes they can interrupt our social lives, our work time. If you think about the last time you went out to dinner with someone, how challenging it is to put that mobile phone down. I notice in Europe they've actually invented some beer steins that have a slot for a mobile phone underneath. And the temptation is so great out there that breweries and pubs are challenging people to put their mobile phones on the table and leave their beer on top of their mobile phone while they're having a conversation. It's pretty difficult to be drinking your stein whilst you're on the phone as well. So they really want people to get back to connecting with one another. Social media has taken over television and the internet as the #1 digital media in Australia. And Australia is one of the largest consumers of social media in the world. We rival the US. We're taking up social media at a greater rate than most countries in the world. For every hour an Australian spends online, close to 25% of that is spent on social media. Think about it. Lots of you spend lots of time online at work, so do a lot of your employees, both in their work time and in their home time. Most of them are spending a lot of their time on social media. So in this time from when social media first launched, really back in 2004 with Facebook and MySpace, once upon a time it was really just about that social interaction, connecting with your friends, sharing silly stories, sharing cat videos. It was really a social platform. But now it's become today, if you fast forward 9 years, and it has become one of the most powerful commercial tools that we have available to us. And essentially, most of the time, it's for free. You don't have to pay a subscription fee to get involved with Twitter or Facebook. You don't have to pay a subscription fee to use Instagram and post a picture of your latest harvest. Your major investment in social media is committing the time and the resources to making sure that it's managed well, that it's not just ad hoc. Sure, there's been lots of people out there that have just learned as they've gone along the bumpy path to success, and I'm certainly one of those. But what you can learn on reflection is that by having a strategy in place, having a clear plan, and investing some time in social media, regardless of the amount of time that you think you've got available for it, you can see the results fairly quickly in your business. In 2014, 84% of business-to-business marketers were using social media at some point in their business. Social media lead conversions rate 13% higher than any other lead conversion per category. Customers are also more likely, Kathy sort of spoke about this, they're 90% more likely to engage with a company, service, or try a new product that's been recommended by a friend on social media. And a whopping 46% of all online users rely on social media recommendations in making their purchasing decisions. So think about that. Think about how that challenges your notion of what social media means today. And whilst it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, and there's no magic bullet as to how to make social media work for you, the very nature of social media means that you constantly need to be engaging with your audience to understand their needs and adapt and change to manage your relevance with your audience. In doing my research for this presentation, like a good social media marketer does, you try to understand who your audience is first. I took the time to digitally stalk some of you. I had a list of attendees, and I took the time to have a look at the businesses that you work for and the sectors that you represent. And whilst I won't tell any tales or name and shame anyone in the room today, you may be interested to know that whilst I was having a look at that, there were some businesses that were represented here that, while they didn't have a business profile on Facebook, they still had a page that represented them. Does anyone in here think that might represent them? It's worth having a look at what your brand means out there in the social media space. Go on Google, I dare you. Go and see if your business pops up, even regardless of whether you have a social media page or not. This particular business had 169 followers, and yet they didn't have a social media site that they'd established themselves. Because visitors, employees, suppliers had tagged themselves at their particular property, Facebook took the liberty of creating a Facebook page for them. It gives people the ability to share a comment about your business. It gives them the ability to share an opinion. It gives them the ability to interact with your brand without you even knowing it. So for those people that think social media is irrelevant, a waste of time, I suggest that the first thing you do when you get an opportunity is to go and have a look. Search your business online. Have a look at it on Facebook. Have a look at it on Twitter. Try and find yourself out there, regardless of whether you think you've put yourself out there or not. But what I did want to share with you, the thing that I've taken away from understanding social media or trying to understand social media is perhaps where the reference to fishing comes into this presentation. When I saw this fact, it absolutely astounded me. It was one of the most shocking things I think that I've read online in my entire life. And for me, it's quite game-changing, particularly confronting for someone like me who's got to stand up in front of an audience of people that I've really never met before, and I have to try and hold your attention for 30 minutes during a presentation. The thing that I found most shocking is the average person, and I'm sure you all share this level of shock, the average person has an attention span of less than 7 seconds. We've become so busy and focused on consuming information that our attention span is now less than that of a goldfish. And so while I don't want to lose you in the next 7 seconds by bombarding you with facts and figures, there are some highlights of social media usage in Australia today that are very relevant to the food industry. As I said, women have become the biggest users of social media across all platforms. And whilst the growth of Facebook has slowed, it still dominates the social media world with 14 million individual users in Australia. That's almost 2/3 of our entire population are online using social media every day. Other platforms that follow in popularity, they really feign in terms of their usage, but the next most popular is YouTube, Instagram, Tumblr, LinkedIn, Blogspot, and then Twitter. Instagram is continuing to grow, and there are now 5 million monthly active users in Australia, overtaking Tumblr as the 4th most social network in Australia. And so while perhaps we have Steve Jobs and the invention of the iPhone to thank or blame for the tragic evolution of the human species to having an attention span not even the equivalent of a goldfish, our world is becoming increasingly competitive, increasingly noisy, increasingly connected, and our audience expects to be constantly engaged and entertained. Something that strikes me in terms of the consumerism within our society and the demand for consumers to be engaged with their brands. Once upon a time, after-sales service used to be the domain of large ticket items like luxury cars, or perhaps if you bought a house or a new fridge. You demanded a level of service. If there was something wrong, you wanted the salesperson's number, you wanted to be able to engage with them, and you shared your thoughts. Fast forward to today, and the same is happening to our major grocery brands. I'm not sure if any of you saw it. I think the PMA shared it on their Facebook site, the recent example of how Woolworths used their social media to manage a complaint about avocados. Did anyone see that post? It was incredibly entertaining, and I would suggest that you take the opportunity to have a look at it, and I'm happy to share the link with you. They spent a lot of time engaging with a sense of humour with this particular individual. They went back to them, personal messaged them, shared hints and tips about about selecting ripe avocados, and he turned into a raving fan about their organisation. He shared the post, it went viral, and within a couple of days, 35,000 people had seen this post and interacted with it. And Woolworths won in the stakes of reputation and brand amongst some of our 2 major supermarket giants. On the flip side, unfortunately for Coles, there's been a recent segment on Four Corners, which some of you may have seen, in terms of labour practices within the supermarkets. They went from promoting jazz apples at $4 a kilo to being bombarded with feedback in terms of their employment standards and how they engage employees within their organisation. What went from a simple promotion of apples and trying to engage people to go into their shop to buy apples, it was completely flipped on its head, and it was an example of what not to do in managing customer complaints. They spent time posting responses that were duplicated. So when somebody made a comment about the Four Corners article, it was the same stock standard response that was printed online, posted online over and over and over again. And of course that just brought the wrath of the consumer again. They went back and said, well, thanks very much for the stock standard response, but what do you really think? When you're thinking about engaging in social media, it's important, yes, you want to tell stories, yes, you want to have positive interactions with your community out there, But just remember, you are handing the megaphone over to them. If there is a political issue or a cause that could potentially be linked to your business, there will be people out there that do engage in social media and try to bring you into that space. When you're planning your social media strategy, you need to think in advance about how you're going to manage crises. We have Jonathan here today, and he represents the berry industry in Australia. Back in February, with, of course, you would all be familiar with the frozen berries scare. Social media proved to be very powerful in terms of engaging and providing information to consumers that were concerned about eating berries. Jonathan shared with me earlier today, as through their social media, they were able to educate the consumer about the difference between fresh product in Australia and frozen product that was coming from China, and they noted an increase in their sales. If you went back 5 or 10 years ago, it would be very difficult to engage with your consumers on that level of detail, to actively educate them, to make them feel like they've learned something about their interaction with your business. So in terms of the food industry, it's really quite good news. If you look at the trends in terms of what's trending in social media, what are some of the most shared images out there? And think about the posts that you've seen recently. People are obsessed with food. People are becoming amateur chefs, amateur food critics, amateur food photographers. The rise of celebrity television, celebrity chefs, the master chefs that keep reinvigorating themselves year and year. I'm not sure whether their audiences can continue to be reinvigorated, but food has become one of the #1 obsessions in social media. There's a great opportunity for you to connect with your audiences by building on this obsession. Back in the day when I was studying at university and I studied destinational marketing, the 6 Ps were the toolkit, if you like, for marketers in my business. Many of you may have seen them as the 4 Ps on product, price, place and promotion. We're obsessed with defining our product, identifying our distribution strategy, developing our pricing strategy, and then taking our product to market through advertising and promotion. Fast forward to 2015 and into the magic buzzwords, which of course marketers created to continually reinvigorate themselves and keep them relevant. The buzzwords ruling the social media world today are creating, curating, connecting, and culture. Despite social media sometimes being termed the antisocial or unsocial media, social media is feeding a need for people to be heard, to share their stories, to learn from one another, to teach, and basically to feel connected. Rather than putting the product at the centre of your marketing efforts, these 4 Cs clearly and boldly put the customer, your audience, at the centre. But here's the trick. Remember, you only have 7 seconds to do it. So when thinking about how you're going to engage people with your business online, think about this. People don't buy what you do or what you produce. They buy how you do it and why you do it. So, going back to our fish analogy, and why fishing is important for the agriculture and horticulture industry. What you've got to remember is that you only have 7 seconds to grab their attention. What you want to do is create content that's engaging. At the heart of your message should be why you're in the business you're in. It is your personal story and the story of the individuals that are connected to your business and your brand story that make it interesting. So being a good loyal shepherd and girl from the Goulburn Valley, here's a beautiful recent example of how SPC have connected Australians to growers and their products as part of their recently released My Family Can campaign.
We are faced with when we're trying to grow the product in Australia. I'm 4th generation in this country. My grandfather was born here and he pioneered this place, and then my father started growing fruit here and I've carried on. My father worked until he dropped at 87, an amazing person. I'm sitting here right now, my 86-year-old mother is down picking fruit and she's worked like that all her life. She's a very tough woman. We've often worked very long hours. 3 hours sleep is quite common this time of the year, but when you consider everything, It's really something that we enjoy doing, and that's why we continue in this tradition. I didn't initially buy all of this, it was handed to me. And it's my obligation now to pass it on to my son. And I'd very much like to see him take over. It would be wonderful even to have my father here to see that. I think he'd be very proud. Putting Australian families on the label gives people recognition of the actual people who are producing product. It will help Australians to understand where things are grown and where the food comes from. I think it's a very positive step towards supporting families and supporting Australian farmers. It's good. I think that might go on the mantelpiece, yes.
And so while SPC is in the business of creating canned fruit, canned tomatoes, and reinventing themselves into soft serve ice cream, what they do in this particular campaign is not talk about their canned fruit. They talk about the people that make up their business, the growers that supply to them, and the connection that people have to land and the nostalgia around farmers. And the results have been able to speak for themselves. The SPC My Family Can campaign, in the short time since it launched last month, has had close to 1 million views, has had almost 18,000 shares and over 26,000 likes. Now, following on from Kathy, those numbers probably don't sound so significant considering our population versus the US. It's still a really outstanding achievement. These are just some of the examples. There's a lot of love being shown to SPC and to Gary and his family. People are engaging. They're talking about how much they love Australian food, how they look out for buy local, that they always look for them on the supermarket shelves these days. And this has been instrumental in rebuilding the SPC brand and business over the last 12 months or so. In another demonstration, and this is probably where SPC, regardless of the fact that they're owned by Coca-Cola Amatil, the local branch in Australia, they really cut their teeth in social media in a campaign that was perhaps surprising to many of you, but it was actually established by an individual woman in Newcastle, SPC Sunday. So there was a woman by the name of Linda Drummond in Newcastle, and she was on Twitter. She was a Twitter user. She asked her friends and family via Twitter and Facebook to buy a can of SPC peaches that week and create a dinner, create a meal, a dessert for their family of peaches and cream. She shared it online and it went viral. So not only did Linda engage her friends and family, but she also engaged much of the nation in terms of making SPC Sunday. SPC were in crisis mode. They were trying to seek funding from the federal and state government to save their business. It was coming to decision-making time. So they were actively patrolling, if you like, or reviewing the online posts to see what they would need to respond to, if they were going to get a sniff or a hint as to which way the decision was going to go. And this particular post caught their eye, and it caught on. They were quickly able to see how it was shared so rapidly, and within the course of 2 days, they were able to mobilise their connections, their key influencers to get behind the campaign. Here we have Anthony Wiggle. He jumped on board as an individual. He didn't need to be tapped on the shoulder by SPC. And in the course of the campaign, they were actually able to gain a lot of exposure amongst key followers and raving fans of their business. And within a week, Woolworths were changing the way they were stocking product on the shelves. I remember being in Shepparton and completely horrified when I'd go in to the local Woolworths that actually overlooked SPC to see the SPC and Ardmona product sitting on the bottom of the shelf. I made the effort to go and speak to the manager to ask if there was anything that they could do to shift its prominence on the shelf and move the generic brand to the lower shelves. That did nothing. But simply sharing a tweet and having it go viral within a week had changed the way that both Woolworths and Coles were stocking their shelves. And as they say, the rest is history, but one of the icons in Australian food, and particularly in the community that I live, was saved. It's pretty astounding to think that social media can have that power. And whilst, yes, I acknowledge that SPC is a large brand, and yes, they have the backing of Coca-Cola, I think what this example does demonstrate is that you don't have to spend a lot of time and money investing in social media to engage your audience. If you're aligned with a cause, if your audience can relate to you and they support you, they can do a lot of the work for you. You just have to give them the tools and the information so they know enough about you, they trust you, they feel a transparent relationship with you so that they can go and be part of your army and share your story. So the SPC Sunday hashtag and the My Family Can hashtag, if you do a Google search and put in hashtags, I don't know, do any of you use hashtags to do Google searches at the moment? Okay, only a couple. So perhaps as a tip and a hint from this session, next time you're looking for trends, particularly in the food industry, go into Google, put a hashtag and put a particular theme and see what comes up. Here's a couple that you might want to consider. The odd bunch, the push to have not quite right fruit and vegetables bought by mass consumers. The ugly food movement, that's something that is growing worldwide, and Australia and the UK are leading the charge in the odd food or the ugly food movement. So that's something that the US are looking at. There was an article just shared in the Times recently about what Australia's doing in that space. Buy local, of course, Aussie farmer, amateur chef, fresh as best, and nom nom. I know the first time I saw nom nom on a Facebook post, I thought, what on earth is nom nom? But it's growing in the uptake. Supposedly it's meant to replicate the sound of the kind of sounds people make when they're enjoying food. Nom nom nom. So go away, have a look on Google, have a look at the hashtags, see what's trending. This could give you some hints and tips as to how you could be marketing your business. And if there's a particular element that strongly reflects what's going on in your business, use it in your social media posts. So we have a lady here who has a market garden and grows kale. Kale is everywhere. All hail the mighty kale. I understand earlier in the year that there was a sell-out of seeds for kale worldwide, and there's become a bit of an obsession with kale. But if you try and track that on social media, you can actually see that it was really popular back in the 90s and it's just resurged. The New York Times track food trends, and they use, I think they call it the calamari scale index, and they track food trends over periods of time. And kale at the moment is one of the food trends that's on the highest rise. Just looking at some of the examples of who's doing it well in the Australian landscape from a social media perspective. Avocados, it must be all about the avocados. The Australian avocado industry is doing it particularly well. They have a mobile-ready website that's fully integrated with their Twitter page, with their Facebook page. Another tip is if you're integrating between platforms, make sure you're tailoring it to meet the needs of the platform. You'll sometimes see, if you get on Australian Bananas or Aussie Apples, you'll see they're sharing feeds across Facebook as their predominant user. They're sharing photographs, and there'll be graphics within the photographs. And they're enabling their social media platforms to pick it up and share it automatically on Twitter. That's not working because often the comments that come along with Twitter need to be supported by the photograph, and if you don't take that across, it doesn't make any sense and you turn your followers off. On a locally sort of more grower-orientated example, we've got Ross and Bartlow Apples, part of the Aussie Apples distribution chain. They're based in New South Wales, and they're doing quite well in terms of how they're telling stories about their growers. They're sharing information on recipes, they're sharing information on how they get their product to market, and they've been able to garner some support from celebrity chefs such as Matt Preston. And then on a smaller scale, one of the examples that I really liked was Providence Growers in southern Tasmania. This is a really lovely example of how engaging with a special interest. There's a couple, they've got a market farm, she's a photographer and likes to write. She's a beautiful writer. She has a blog post and she shares information on Twitter, on Facebook, and also on her blog spot. Have a look at it. The photographs are really engaging, but she's not just sharing her stories through photographs. There is a call to action. She lets people know when she's going to be at the latest farmers market. She lets them know which restaurants are stocking her produce and where they can find it via various supermarket chains. Social media can almost be a little bit like this graph. You can set out on a path that you've planned, but what happens next is often out of your control, because remember, you're handing the controls and the megaphone over to your audience. What I'd like you to think about in terms of the next steps, go away and listen first. Listen and learn first. Understand what your audience is saying or who your potential audiences are and what they're interested in. Provide them with the driving wheel, if you like. Define your goals before you set out. Don't just randomly throw yourself into social media without understanding what you want to get out of it. It can be a time waster if you don't have clearly defined goals. Don't be obsessed about numbers either. It's not necessarily about getting 100,000 likes or 1,000 likes, whilst 1,000 likes can be a good critical mass. It is about engaging with connected and engaged followers that will speak on behalf of your company and your brand and share your stories with their friends and followers. Are you accessible? I'd encourage you all to go away and have a look at your websites to see if they're mobile friendly. You're probably all aware that Google is changing the way it's allowing search functions to come up, and those websites that have a mobile friendly website will be ranked much higher than those that don't. So if I was to go in and Google fresh apples, for instance, the company that has a mobile friendly site will always come up above yours, regardless of how much work you've done in search engine optimization. There are a number of tools that are basically free to use, including Wix, that enable you to make your website mobile friendly and interactive on a mobile device. That's probably your first tip. Make sure that you get that right. Then make sure that each of your platforms are talking to one another. I noticed when I was doing a bit of background research that there are some of you out there that do have a website and do have a Facebook page, but you don't connect the dots when you land on either site. If I find you first on Facebook, I want to know about your website. Or conversely, if I find you first on your website, I want to know that you have a social media platform and which social media platforms you're using. Measure the results. There's no point setting out on a journey if you don't know where you're going or what you want to achieve along the way. Make sure that you're tracking how you're travelling on social media, what posts are working, what are not, which ones get the most likes, which ones are shared the most, which ones are interacting with other forms of media and getting picked up by the usual media channels and the news. Then repeat, go back to the start, review, listen, learn. Social media is so dynamic, it's changing all the time. What works today mightn't necessarily work tomorrow. Facebook and various other social media platforms are really quite obsessed with changing the way they go about doing business. Just when you think you've got it worked out and their algorithms, they change, they flip them on their head. Once upon a time, sharing text was enough. Then they wanted you to share images. Now they're wanting you to share video content. So if you're sharing video content, you'll come up in the likes and the feed of your followers more quickly than you will if you're simply sharing photographs.